So guys, we have many LEDs here, but we are only going to use these 4 LEDs. This is the fourth loop, third loop, second loop, first loop. The outermost to the inner. This is the innermost loop. Second loop, third loop, fourth loop. This is the outermost. Outer to inner to outer. Now I turn on the code. You will see that fourth loop is set to repeat 2 times. So it makes sure that these 3 repeats 2 times. This one is set to, the third loop is set to repeat 3 times. It makes sure that these 2 loops repeat 3 times. This one is set to repeat also 3 times. So this makes sure that the first loop repeats 3 times. And the first loop is set to repeat 5 times. So it will repeat 5 times whatever is in it. Now I turn on the code. You will see that now the code is working. See, the fourth loop's first repetition, the third loop's first repetition, which is mandatory, and the second loop's first repetition. Now it's the second loop second, third loop second, second loop's third. Now third loop's third. See, now it's again second loops. Second loop will repeat 3 times. Now we went to the fourth loops. Now fourth loop, now again it started all over again because the fourth loop is set to 2 times. Again the fourth loop, first time 3 loop will make sure these 2 repeat 3 times, and this loop makes sure that the first loop repeats 3 times and the first loop repeats 5 times. Now see, this is the third loop's repetitions going on. Now the second loop's repetition, see, it will be 3 times because it is set to 3 times. Now it's terminated. Now again all over again. Hello guys, welcome to learning microcontrollers. In this video I'm going to show you how we can do the loops within loops form of programming on MikroC for PIC programming tool, and I will be using PIC16F877A microcontroller for demonstration purpose. So let's get started. So guys, this over here is our PIC16F877A microcontroller having 40 pins. It's a DIP version, and this over here is an LED. I will be using 4 of these 5mm crystal type LEDs to demonstrate to you how we can use 4 do-while loops to make a single loop within a loop system. So we will be using 4 do-while loops. The first loop will be the most inner, second the outer, third the most outer, fourth the most outer, and each loop will be represented by each LED. So in this way our loops within loop programming is gonna work. Now guys, let me show you how to connect this LED with a PIC so we can move on to the programming. Now as you can see, each LED has 2 pins, one longer and one shorter. The shorter pin, I make it black like this, and shorter pin is always the ground, while the longer pin is always the power of the LED, and you cannot shuffle these 2 pins. Now for the shorter pins, as you know, these are ground pins. Now I common them and send them to the common ground of the PIC16F877A microcontroller like this. Now guys, for the longer pin, you will need a safety resistor, 1 resistor for each LED. So 4 LEDs means 4 resistors. Now this resistor value can be any value from 100 to like any value that you prefer, because higher the value of this safety resistor, the dimmer the LED will go. Now it depends upon how much bright your LED you want them to be. So select the resistor accordingly. This resistor will be a safety resistor. It will limit the current. Without this resistor, there is a chance of getting the LED burned. So I'm going to use a 220 ohm resistor because it's an ideal value. I need the brightness of that value. Now guys, what I do is that let's connect the longer pins. First of all, for the top LED, connect the longer pin to the one end of the 220 ohm resistor like this. From the other end, you can connect it to any available digital input output pin of your PIC. I'm going to use the pin number B3 for this. Now for the second pin from top, connect the longer pin to the one end of the 220 ohm resistor like this. From the other end, I connect it to the pin number B2 like this. Now similarly for the third LED, for the longer pin, connect it to the one end of the 220 ohm resistor like this. From the other end, just connect it to any available digital input output pin. I'm going to use the pin number B1 like this. Now for the fourth LED, connect the longer pin to the one end of the 220 ohm resistor like this. From the other end, I connect it to the pin number B0 like this. In this way, our all 4 LEDs are connected. Now let me introduce you to the hardware before we move on to the programming. So guys, this over here is our hardware. As you can see, out of these, I am only going to use the 4 LEDs. Behind it, the PIC16F877A microcontroller, and you can see the PIC3 connected. So guys, in the description of this video, I will also share the link to the video in which I had taught you how to set up your hardware for the first run. So don't get confused with the trainer board. So guys, now let's get to the MikroC for PIC to get started with the programming. So guys, this over here is our MikroC for PIC. Let me zoom in so you guys can see better. So guys, as you can see, it's version 7.6.0. You can use a higher version also if it's available. I will also share the link to the video in which I had shown you how you can easily download and install this MikroC for PIC for free from official website and a full version. So guys, click on File, New Project. This window pops up, New Project Visit. Click on Next. Write the name of the project. I write Loops. Within Loops Tutorial by Learning Microcontrollers, like this. Now guys, here you have the path where you will store the files. This is the microcontroller you are gonna use. I'm gonna use a PIC16F877A, and the crystal connected to the pin number 13 and 14 of the PIC16F877A is 20 MHz. So I select 20 here, click on Next and Finish. Now guys, as you can see, this window pops up. Press Ctrl S to save your work before you do anything else, like this. Now guys, as you know, we are using port B and we are using the 4 pins of port B. Let's initialize those pins. Let me zoom in further so you guys can see even better. So I initialize the first pin, that is the port B, B3, pin number B3, that is trisB.F3 equals to 0. Why 0? Because 0 means the pin tris is a direction register, and 0 means the pin has been declared as output, and 1 means it's an input. So in our case, we are going to connect the LED, and LED always connected to an output pin. Now initially by default I want the pin to be port B.F3 to be 0. Like by default the LED must be off. So this command makes sure that the pin is getting a 0 by default. So now we give some initialization delay, not necessary, but I always suggest you give it in the one-time loop. Now in this way our first pin is initialized. Now we initialize our second LED. Okay, it is just F2, same port, only the pin number is different. That will be pin number F2, same. Second pin is initialized and initially the LED is off and an initialization delay. Now do it for the third and fourth LED as well. Now this is the third LED connected to pin B.F1, that is pin number B1, and the fourth LED connected to B.F0, like this. In this way our all 4 LED pins are initialized. Now we move on to the forever loop. Write down while 1 forever loop starts here and ends here. Now guys, inside it we do our programming. First of all, I take 4 integer variables for each loop. I write integer loop 1. This will be the first loop variable. Integer loop 2, second loop. Integer loop 3. You can count them, call them counters as well for each loop, whatever you prefer them. Or you can just use 1 as well, but in my case, to make you understand, I'm going to use 1 variable for each loop. But there is a technique as well. You can use only 1 variable for all 4 loops as well. So loop 4 is our variable for the 4th loop. Now initially I want all the 4 variables to be 0 because I'm always going to start from 0. So I write loop 1 equals to 0 by default, loop 2 equals to 0 by default, loop 3 equals to 0 by default, and loop 4 equals to 0 by default, like this. So all 4 loops variables are 0 by default. Now we write the first variable, first loop variable. I write here first loop starts from here, and we are going to use a do while loops. So for the first loop I write do while loop starts here and here, and in the while I write loop 1 variable, and like I will like to repeat it for 5 times. Whatever you like to repeat it for how many times, I'm just going to repeat it for 5 times for your understanding. Now here I write loop 1 equals to loop 1 plus 1. So whenever this loop is executed 1 time, it means loop variable is incremented by 1, so maximum it can go 5. So do while loop always repeats 1 time, executes 1 time. So 1 time do while loop is always executed. It means that it will be executed 1 time always. So less than 5 means it will be exactly 5. While in for loop, if you write less than 5, it will be 4 times. So here it will be 5 because 1 time it will execute at all cost. Now I blink an LED. So I take this LED, the innermost LED, port B.F3. By default it's 0. I make it 1. For how long? Like 250 millisecond will be enough. I make it like turn the LED on for 250 millisecond like this, and then turn it off for another 250 milliseconds like this. I make it 0 again like this. So what is going to happen is that when the first loop is executed, the LED connected to pin number B3 will turn on and off 5 times. After 0.4 of a second, to 50 millisecond it will be on, and to 50 millisecond it will off, and it will repeat 5 times. After the repetition, the loop 1 equals to 0 again. Now we test this code, only this part. I build this code, click on build, check for errors, no error. Go to your PIC16 programmer tool. Here it is. I will also share the link to the video in which I had shown you how you can download and install this PIC16 programmer software for free. I click on file, import hex file. So this is the file we just created. I click on write. Okay, the new file is being written. Let's get to the hardware to see what's going to happen. So let it write the new file. Okay, once it's written, I will power up the circuit using the PIC16 programmer tool. See, it is repeating. See, it's working fine because we have not stopped the code. After what is happening here is that it repeats for 5 times and then it keeps on repeating in the forever loop because we are not stopping the code. Now what I do is that I write a command here that this is the first loop ends here. I call it first loop ends. Now to make sure that it did 5 times, I write a command here that I make it on for, where it is, this pin. So I will turn it on for like 1 second to make sure that the loop has ended. So we can count how many times it has blinked, and then after that it will go back to the initial state for the loop to repeat like this. So this will be just you can say a terminator confirmation for ending. That's what I call it. Now I build this code. I write this again. Now we count how many times it repeats. Okay, we go to the programmer tool, click on write. Okay, the new file is being written. Let's get to the hardware. Let it write the new code. Okay, it's done. Now we will count how many times it repeats. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then it turns on for a second. See, it's exactly 5 times. So that's perfect. Now we write the other loops. Now what I do is that I bring in the second loop. I write here. Now this will be the innermost loop. I write do while. I call it second loop. I call it the second loop. Second loop. This is the main thing you just understood. Rest is just repeating the loops. So this is the second loop starting here, and I make it end here. So the second loop will end here. I write while again. While loop 2 is like second loop will repeat for 3 times. So it will be 3 times. 3 times the first loop, second loop repeats. It means that 3 cross 5 there will be 15 times both the loop, first and second. So after blinking for 5 times, again it will blink for 5 times, again it will blink for 5 times, and then it will turn the LED on for 3 seconds. Now to make the loop repeat, I also make the second loop variable go 0, else it will keep on going. I think there is a problem here. Okay, let me, so that's how you write it. So loop 2 will become 0. So here too we write this comment so we can understand the second loop ends here. Now here we also add this for the second loop. Now we do the same. We also get an LED and a terminator. I write here. For the second loop we use the second LED port B.F2. Now this will be the port B.F2 turning off for the second loop, and the counter for the second loop is loop 2 command like this. And we also add in the termination as well. Now both the LEDs will turn on once the loop has been executed here like this, and then both the LEDs will turn off as well after 1 second to make sure that the loop has ended. Now I build this code for the 2 loops and let's see what happens. Now what we are going to expect is that second loop starts, so the LED connected to port B.F2 turns on for 250 millisecond and then turns off for 250 millisecond, and the loop counter is updated by 1. And then the inner loop, this loop repeats like for this is our inner loop. It repeats for 5 times this loop, and after that the outer loop, that is the second loop, gets its first complete repetition, and after that again it will repeat like 3 times, like 3 times. This LED will blink 5 times, like it will be 15 times, and this will blink like only 3 times. So let's see, does it do the same or not. So let me run this code to see what happens. So I click on write. Okay, the new command is being written. Just wait. See, this LED over here is the outer loop and this one is the inner loop. 2 times. See, excellent. Now it just went for 3 times and then it turned the both LEDs on. The outer loop 3 times, the inner loop 5 times. See, and then it turns on the LEDs. That's great. Now we write the other 2 loops as well for the other 2 LEDs. That will be just copy paste, nothing difficult now. So what I do is that I write another loop here. I write do starting here and I call it the third loop. I call it third loop starts, and then I go down and here after that I write while loop 3 is less than. I also give it 3 repetitions for the third loop as well. So third LED will also have 3 repetitions, and then the loop 3 will also equals to 0. That is exactly the same we did in the inner loops. So it will also turn the loop delimiter to 0, else it will not repeat again, because if already it's 3, it will just check the condition, it's 3 and it will only repeat 1 time. Now this is our loop 3. I write this here. It is third loop, sorry, it's third. I write this here, and again now I use the first LED, that is port B.F1, like this, turns on and off, and loop is third like this, and it will be 3 times. Now we write the fourth loop as well at the same time, do while, and I call it fourth loop starts. So fourth loop starts here, and for the fourth loop we will be using port B.F0 LED like this, and the variable will be loop 4. And for the ending command we go down, and here our third loop end. Now here we end our fourth loop. I write while loop 4 is less than. I just repeat the fourth loop 2 times, that's fine. And now we also write the ending comment. So this is for the third loop. Second, it's ND. Third loop ends, and then we write a comment here that the fourth loop ends. So it's basically should be here, because this command is not a loop. Loop ends here, and here too the loop ends after the while. That's just to zero the counter, and here too we write here the fourth loop ends. I make it fourth loop ends. So it will repeat only 2 times, and I write the fourth variable, that is fourth loop equals to 0, else it will not repeat, because it will be already 2 here and it will not repeat again. Now in this way our 4 loops are programmed. So here we go. Now what we are going to expect here is that our first loop, that is the fourth loop, will start once the code runs, and port B.F0 LED will turn on, and it will remain on for 250 millisecond, and then it will turn off for 250 millisecond, and after that it will increase the delimiter by 1, and then our third loop will start, and it will turn the LED connected to B1 on and off, toggle it for after 250 millisecond, and then it will increment its own counter as well. After that, our third loop, that is the second loop, will turn on, and the LED connected to B.F2 will turn on for 250 millisecond, and then it will turn off after 250 millisecond and will remain off for 250 millisecond, and its delimiter, that is the counter, will be incremented by 1. Sorry, the counter will be incremented by 1. And then our innermost loop, that is our first loop, will turn on, and it will remain on for 250 millisecond, and then it will turn off after 250 millisecond, and in this way it will toggle like after 250 millisecond, and then it will repeat 5 times. And once it's done repeating, then the outer loop will make sure that this repeats 5 times, and then this loop will make sure that these two loops repeat 3 into 5, 15 times. These two loops should repeat 15 times, and then the outermost loop will make sure that the inner loop, this loop, repeats 3 times, and this loop repeats another 3 times, and this loop repeats 5 times. So it will be 3 into 3, 9 into 5, something like 55. And after that, to make sure that the code has ended, I also bring the other two LEDs in for the third and the fourth loop. For the third loop, we are using B.F1, and for the fourth loop, we are using B.F0 like this. And similarly, we do it. After this, they will turn off like this. Now we just run the code and see does it works the same way or not. So I build the code. Okay, the code is built. Okay, there is an error at 31 here. Okay, we didn't wrote this. We need these semicolons. Now again build it. Okay, there is still an error. Okay, we just copy pasted it. So error at 1 means error at both. So it's successfully built, no errors. Now we go to our programmer tool. I click on write. Okay, the new code is being written. Let's get to the hardware. Okay, this is the hardware. Let it write the new code, and then we see what happens. Okay, see. Now see, the outermost, the second loop, the third loop, and the first loop. Fourth, third, second, first loop. See. Now the fourth loop makes sure that 2 times these repeats. Now this will make sure that 3 times these two repeat, and this will make sure that the 5 times this one repeats. See, this is how the loops within the loops are gonna work. See. Now this is the second time for the outermost loop. It is making sure that the inner one repeats 2 times. So this is the second cycle because the outermost was 2. See. And the third one is 3, and this is also 3 times. So this one makes sure that these repeats as many times we have set the while counter that it should be less than 2 or 3. In our case, it's less than 2. And this one is set to 3, and this one is set to 3, and this one is set to 5. See? Now they are terminated. So this is perfect. So guys, this is it. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section. I will be very happy to help you. And this code will be in the description of the video. I will make a Google Drive link, and I will share that link in the video, so you can just in the description of the video, so you can just log in, just download it from there. So thank you very much for your time, guys. We'll see you in the next video.